Yep. Lick, roll, roll.
So today we do got a couple hot topics to talk about. We got a huge show, actually. Very excited to be bringing it to you guys. But throughout the day, we, of course, got Rick talking about the news at 5, as every time. We've got a couple interviews that Jamie did with Tommy Chong, which are coming up. And, of course, we're always going to celebrate 420 together with a little bit of a comedy segment. And today we're going a little bit off topic with this kneeling during the national anthem for the NFL football games and beyond. I know we have a couple different sides, and it might be an important thing for us to talk about because freedom of speech and freedom to protest is something that we find important. So this is going to be a big show, guys. How you feeling?
I'm always good.
Yep, looking forward to it. We decided that we were gonna take on this Kaepernick issue, and hopefully some people will call in. What exactly is the number?
To this radio station, the number would be 313-879-5059.
All right. I know some people have some strong opinions on that issue.
And for those of you listening in podcasts, we're broadcasting live on Tuesday afternoon at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. If you listen after 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time and you call that number, you'll get a different radio show, which could still be fun for you. But
yeah, I'd still call. I don't know.
Yeah, podcasts are great. We get a chance to reach people at a whole bunch of different times in different latitudes and everywhere else. But for those of you listening live right now, we would like to talk to you about this. You know, obviously, even the president weighed in on this, and it was the POTUS's remarks that really spurred a lot of the response that we saw from the NFL, not just players and coaches, but owners even taking part in a protest.
Yeah. So, you know, we don't want to confuse listeners. It is still a cannabis-driven show, but I feel as if you guys had a really big public kind of argument about it on Facebook. I don't know if that's the right thing to say here, but I know that there are two sides of this argument, maybe more, and you guys represent maybe different opinions on this. It could get interesting later in the show. But I definitely want to have callers call in and tell us what they're thinking as well. And, of course, I've got an opinion of my own every now and again. But so what do you think, Jamie? Where are you standing on it? Or are you kneeling?
Well, I personally stand usually for the national anthem, and I don't think any of this discussion is going to necessarily change my mind and how I personally approach that. But I really do find it to be interesting, and I'm happy ultimately with the fact that it has spurred on such a discussion about social justice. And for those who have gotten past this being about a flag or a song, there's been some really important stuff to look at there that has been brought to light through all of this.
You know, it's important to note, too, I was reading the Washington Post today, and they reminded everyone that this was begun as a protest against white police officers gunning down African-American men across the United States. That was Kaepernick's original reason for kneeling during the anthem. Now we've got the president trying to make it about a song or make it about a flag, when in reality, none of that's true. If you look at the people that participated in kneeling during the anthem this last Sunday and even on Monday evening in the football game too, you'll see that they're predominantly African American. Not all. Jerry Jones, who is probably the whitest guy you'll ever meet in your life.
Mrs. Ford.
Owner of the Dallas Cowboys,
yep.
And Mrs. Ford. Several owners participated in solidarity with their teammates. And whether it was Trump's intention or not, what he did do is galvanize a whole group of people in the United States. I don't think it was galvanized to a purpose that he would approve of, but oftentimes that's what we find by repression. Isn't that correct? When you make people suffer, it creates a sense of brotherhood amongst them.
Hey, notably, people in support of Donald Trump were in opposition of his statements. Tom Brady, for one.
Very true. Yeah, but when you start talking about blanket statements like all athletes this or all athletes that, you're missing the point. And when you try and single out a particular group of people as anti-American, you're painting a lot of folks with one brush, and it's really an inaccurate portrayal. I think we're seeing that a lot in the tweets and some of the other statements from POTUS, where he's just decrying an entire group of people, whether they be Mexicans or LGBT or Democrats, all in the same brush, even though there's a big swath of variety amongst that group. And, you know, anytime you use broad generalizations like that, you're going to offend people. And he should know better. Anybody in his position should be well advised, and he's not.
I never thought he really wanted to be president the whole time he was campaigning because of the stuff he would say, and I don't get the feeling he wants to stay president. But because of the stuff that he says, but I don't know.
If you look at the Russian connection, it looks like a lot of these things were done just to advantage their own business and political interests without an expectation of success. Hey, we tried, we failed at the president, but now we get our Trump towers in Moscow. Yay! But he was successful. So now all of those things that he did in an ill-advised manner that he never thought anyone would pay attention to are under a great degree of scrutiny. Same thing is going to be true for his legacy as a president. Twitter is never going to let his feed die. So all of the things that he said that have been memorialized, that's going to be what appears in history books. And whether Donald Trump appreciates it or not, that is the enduring legacy of his presidency, is one of Twitter feed gone bad.
So the Free Press reports a person, I can't think of the name right now, is organizing a protest at the next Lions game, and it's in support of Trump and encouraging, the firing or the stopping of this. I suppose in his mind, this disrespect or whatever it is, and so it'll be interesting to see how that stuff plays out. I don't think there's a lot of steam for that kind of stuff, but there are certainly some individuals who are still spouting off about it.
It's important to remember too, especially for our listeners that may be in support of Trump, that are looking, for ways to find a side on where they stand with cannabis or, with this Kaepernick situation. I think it's important that we kind of remember to single out these things that are happening right now, like kneeling or standing for the national anthem, and keep them to just that one topic. Keep them to talking about the one thing that's happening then, instead of straying off to all these other beliefs.
Have you never listened to us on the radio before?
It's okay. It's okay to
straying off topic is what we do. That's our trademark.
It's okay, but when we go back to standing or sitting, does it my confusion with it always came down to the fact is it really about Trump? Because this started before
his
Trump.
Statements were significant, right. and they are a part of the story. The reason there was so much reaction was a result of his claiming that these people should be fired if they behave like this.
Right.
Here's a perspective, too. Remember, that Kaepernick originally did his kneeling in 2016.
Right.
The reason that it became relevant is because Kaepernick seems to have found it impossible to find a job for himself in the National Football League afterwards. So in Week 1 and Week 2 of the regular season of the NFL, we saw some players showing support not only for Kaepernick but also for the issue, too. And that's what got the president to start tweeting. The timing is because it's been 2 or 3 weeks into the NFL season, and the kneeling doesn't seem to be going away, and in fact it seems to be accelerating. One thing I'll note is that these are the same NFL teams whose members are kneeling that support the National Guard, that have these giant Air Force flyovers, that honor veterans, that give free tickets to the disabled, that have halftime shows that are surrounding support of our troops. So to say that all of those patriotic things they've done over the decades just get diminished and deteriorated because of a kneeling protest really is short-sighted and idiot.
That's a story in and of itself. The military has spent a lot of money with the NFL in order to help promote recruits and utilize it as a forum to demonstrate an attraction to joining the armed forces. And I think it's only been a few years that the players have been outside of the locker room during the national anthem, and it's all kind of a part of that push when the military decided to really work with the NFL to advertise their their recruiting and all that kind of stuff. So we're asked not to stray a little bit, but that's certainly that's a part of the story.
Well, the fact is, we just learned about this this last week, if I'm not mistaken, Jamie. You're more of a news hound than I am on this respect.
Just last few days during the course of being involved in some of these discussions online and that type of stuff, it was brought up, and it makes a lot of sense. It's all kind of tied in. The military spent a lot of money with the NFL to have paratroopers fly in, and drop in right on the 50-yard line, and to have fireworks and bring out the Marines for the national anthem or whatever they're doing, and it's cool, but that's a part of the story here.
Yeah, I've got a couple decades on me, and I can recall a time when there wasn't big, gigantic flags on the 50-yard line at halftime or before the game. I can remember that's kind of a relatively new iteration. But some of the news reports I read regarding the connection between military payments and performances at NFL games didn't implicate all NFL teams. Some NFL teams worked with military institutions without compensation because for whatever reason, fill in the blank. They thought it was the right thing to do. Maybe the owner was a former military, whatever it was. But we are seeing some of them. And let's face it, the military pays for advertising in a lot of different venues, and that's not bad. If you're trying to recruit people, that's what you have to do. You have to put your advertising in places where it's likely to be absorbed. And if you're trying to reach an adult male audience or a older teen, young adult male audience, football's your great way to do it. So it's a natural pairing, and it makes sense. But it does sort of diminish the patriotism that sometimes we see there.
And it's probably why the teams were coming out of the locker room before the national anthem and participating as part of this whole, it's suggested, as part of this whole push with the military and the NFL. And then we get into the story that we have now. So,
right. Remember, Jamie, you might recall, there was a former Special Forces guy that was an NFL player. And I can't remember what his name was.
I'm not sure about. Is it Tillman?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Tillman. He
and
may
he
not
died.
have been Special Forces.
Yeah, but he just decided to go serve his country,
right.
And he went to Afghanistan. He died, and there was a very controversial story behind there.
But when you talk about the Tillman story, that takes place before any of this other stuff that we're talking about here with potential payments. That was an act of patriotism. A guy who leaves his NFL job, right? Who could have just been cushy forever, and goes back into the field to fight for his country. That was it was inspirational. That's a kind of leadership and heroism we just don't see every day.
His wife is specifically asked to kind of stay out of this conversation.
Yeah, I can imagine.
As I remember reading that story not too long ago.
And that family's been through enough, you know.
And it's not the same, issue.
Right.
I think the funny thing is it's oftentimes like this one that confusion kind of like leaves everybody disagreeing, because if we knew, what we should know, that these people are probably not trying to be anti-patriotic, that everybody in the end is pissed off because they feel like it's the well-being of their country at risk. They don't want somebody kneeling during the national anthem because they feel as if they're being unpatriotic, when the people kneeling during the national anthem feel as if they're doing something to better the country. Mm-hmm. So the one thing that we can all at least agree on is that we're all trying to figure out what the best way is to better the country. Nobody's actually anti-patriotic here. And that confusion is like a lot of times what's pissing people off, and they're yelling, they're swearing at the players, and the freedom of speech, for any human, no matter what they work or no matter what contract they sign, is obviously going to be an important factor. That you got to let Americans do what we want to do. That's the whole reason that we're fighting, to have cannabis legalization.
One thing you have to remember too: this doesn't happen in isolation. We're going through a period of time now where we're seeing the South remove Confederate monuments, where let's just say that we're sort of aligning or realigning the definition of what it is to be American. We embrace certain aspects of our heritage, but we recognize that some of the monuments we created to periods of time may not necessarily reflect our current values. So we're trying to modify the national identity. And when that happens, it's going to be a confusing time that's going to cause a lot of chaos and going to create a lot of animosity. Now, that may have been artificially accelerated by the election of Donald Trump as opposed to the relatively smooth time that we had with President Obama. But we are kind of in a chaotic period at this point.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Adam Brooke had the train wreck theory with Trump.
That he had to completely fail and be a total train wreck before we could rebuild America?
Let him come in and do all this, I guess, stuff that he is actually doing, and
right.
Expose a lot of issues and turn a lot of people on to realizing that they need to step up and take care of some business, and we need to fix things ourselves. We can't just rely on our government.
Totally true. And I think it's appropriate for us to have discussions like this at all times, because we're trying to modify national policies. Where's our priority regarding health care? Where's our priority regarding national security? North Korea's crazy. Russia's crazy. We've got natural disasters, even though our president says that climate change is a hoax perpetrated by the Chinese. So at this time, we're struggling, and we're going to have a difficult time paying for some of the bills that we have, including some of the reconstruction in Texas and Texas and Florida, and there's another state, too, that was really just smacked hard by these recent storms. So Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico is what I'm thinking of.
Right. Yeah, several Caribbean.
Several Caribbean islands. Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. So we're going to have a big obligation, not just as taking care of American citizens, but as the biggest economy on the face of the planet, to help some of these people recover. And if we can't have a comprehensive plan to do that, then I think we failed mankind, not just our own citizenry.
I personally hope, and not to be, I guess, too political, but I hope that looking at Governor Snyder and President Trump, just at the very least, demonstrates to people that running government as if it were a business is not a good idea.
Yeah.
So Yeah. So with that, fellas, I say we take a little bit of break, maybe a music break before we do. Jamie, you wanted to talk about Three Doors Down.
I do. We're really happy to have Three Doors Down on board as sponsors. It's a place that's been near and dear to me for most of my adult life. I remember going to the small store in Pontiac when I was in my teens, even, and discreetly buying some paraphernalia and getting some information. And later on, I was able to be a part of the Three Doors Down business, and now I'm working with the current owner, and he is helping us out, and we're very proud to have him. And it's a really special place. They have smoke accessories, but they have a huge history too of being really in tune and with the community and helping out and that type of stuff. So they're a good place to support, and they have locations in Waterford, Bay City, and Traverse City.
Yeah, that's 5326 Dixie Highway in Waterford Township, Michigan, 48329. So there you go, Three Doors Down. And with that, a music break. We're going to jam a little bit of Snoop Lion.
We'd be lying if we said that we were exactly ready to play Snoop Lion.
It's okay, because the lion sleeps tonight.
And he went back to Snoop Dogg, so this means it was like recorded while he was calling himself Snoop Lion.
Wow.
That's the specific, right?
That is kind of weird. But you know what? Everything's all good.
And when you have several joints flying around, people say we're Snoop Dogg in it, and then for a short time we said we're Snoop Lion it.
Well, I always call him 00GG, so he's the Snoop Dogg to me. 00GG.
I think he made his point and came back to his original.
Exactly right, yes. Well,
like Prince made his point and then came back to his name eventually.
Well, some of you may be familiar with my Facebook page, and I've got a wonderful video on there about Snoop that I took in 2010, 2011, where he talks about Detroit. He has a long history here in Detroit. He moved to Detroit
from Detroit or something.
Well, his mother is from California, but his father is in Detroit. So he got in some legal trouble in Cali, came out to Detroit for a couple years, worked at McDonald's, he says. His father's a postman. So he stayed here with his dad for a couple years, and then he sort of got in trouble in Detroit and headed back to California, and then he got into the music business. So he has a lot of love for this community because he's been here. He knows people here.
Whenever he comes to Michigan, it seems like he hits a lot of spots. He's got to cover a lot of ground.
In my video, he talks about how he was playing big, huge venues in other places, but he'd take smaller gigs in Michigan just so he could come back and see his homies. So that's pretty badass when you're sort of sacrificing money in order to take smaller gigs just because you love the city.
Well, and he helps support youth programs and football programs, and he does a lot of great stuff outside of music and things that we know about typically.
Yeah.
I can't smoke pot because it's the same thing. I'm too old for it. Sometimes young people.
You're never too old.
Smoke weed every day. Don't smoke the seeds. No way. Smoke the weed. Hey, smoke the weed. Younger generation. Boys and girls. Be careful of the seeds you show. If you want to see a strong tree grow, you got to prepare for the future. Show respect, don't neglect Mother Nature. All the pollution in this world, me just can't stand it. Global warming make the whole world panic. Take care of Mother Earth, cause she feed the planet. Youth man, don't go astray. Fresh trees, young seeds, all trying to find the light. Stretching out their limbs to the sun. Guide them right, help them keep their life on track. Watch over like a satellite. Tell them when to stop and go like a traffic light. Any obstacles to overcome in the city life. Making sure they stay pure, teach them what's wrong for right. Seed brings forth new life. Smoke the weed every day. Don't smoke the seeds. No way. Smoke the weed. Hey, smoke the weed. Hey, around 6 a.m. in the morning, when me just wake up, stick the paper, kiss me darling. The bag of herb me break up. How them a fight the herb, me can't stand it. Me a sow the seed, Babylon can't come step on it. Me a mix the weed with all the Grey Goose and tonic. Youth man no stop all the chronic. Every day. Mix a couple breed up. Can't stand it when some boy go the seed up. Me no do that
we are preferred. Them a juggle it on every street curb, and the youth a say weed is life, weed is reality.
Smoke the weed every day. Don't smoke the seeds. No way. Smoke the weed. Hey, smoke the weed. Burn like Baba, you damn a supper. Dance them a pop off hot like the summer. You would never understand why we live to life. You would never recognize unless you see the fire in my eyes. I'm burying a man like every single day. Black birds in the sky can get a break. The smoke is my gun, that's how I blow them away. Music is my weapon, rewind and let it play. Babylon, Tiflis, sunset the whole day. They call me Snoop Lion, I smoke every day. We keep planting these seeds, watch them grow up, new breed, cultivating these trees. The cycle carries on. And on it don't stop. The tick-tock of the universal clock. To the bang-bang boogie of the light streaming through me in the slow that way while we procreate. Smoke the weed every day. Don't smoke the seeds. No way. Smoke the weed.
What is Jam?
I think I'm gonna try something that I ain't never did before on this one. Let's go.
Melodies I never thought I would. I'm feeling sorry for the homies who be smoking wood. Chop, break it down for a player like yeah. I'm about to find me a woman and ski. I'ma keep smoking till I reach my peak. Or till I'm stuck and my body feels weak. Headed down to the dungeon, wondering if they got some more. And if they don't, then I'ma have to settle for some drove. Better just stay cool, cause right on after I'ma have to go and continue on my mission, fishing for the yum, but I'm moving slow. Let's get high. Let's get high. Got that blueberry yum, and it's that fire. It's that fire. Get your lighters, roll, let's get high. Let's get high. Got that blueberry yum, and it's that fire. It's that fire. Yes, fire, got me so tired, I'ma stop, drop, and roll. Put a wet towel under the door. Don't pass it, I can't take it no more. Somebody take a trip down to the store. Hurry please, cause I need some snacks. And how long will it take to get back? Yes indeed, I'm a little off track. Off this weed and I'm full of that yak. Get on in that stankin' Lincoln, crank it up and ride. And it ain't enough room to fit the other chicks inside. I'm so hungry with the munchies, I'ma eat everything inside. Me and my blueberries together and everything's alright. Let's get high. Let's get high. Got that blueberry yum, and it's that fire. It's that fire. Get your lighters, roll, let's get high. Let's get high. Got that blueberry yum, and it's that fire. It's that fire. Get the propane, roll them things, and let's blow this place up. You already know what's up. I might have had to pay some extra bucks, but I really don't give a fuck. Cause a brother feels great. But I'm barely awake. All bent out of shape. So stomp on your break. If you toting good, then all the smoke us. Let me see your flame. Don't know what you got, but my bag up. Put your stuff to shame. All the different kinds and other flavors, they don't mean a thing. You can't compare it, don't stare, cause I got the ultimate Mary Jane. Let's get high. Let's get high. Got that blueberry yum, and it's that fire.
All right.
We're back. And I think we're going to... Hello.
Yeah. Little Ludacris Blueberry Yum Yums, too, with Snoop Lion. So there you go. That was a good little music break for your 420.
Nice.
Pop music.
Did you enjoy your 420, Jamie?
I do. It's 420 for me almost all the time, though.
Almost? When is it not?
Actually, I take a break at 420.
Okay.
I just smoke around it.
What about you, Mr. Thompson?
I always have a good time. 420 is kind of a cool story, you know, how it originated. There's a lot of different variations. One of these days, we'll have to get John Sinclair's wife, Lenny, in to come talk about the origin of 420 because she has a whole different story about it.
Oh, very cool. We should do that.
She's amazing. What a fantastic artist in the photography medium.
Oh, yeah.
She's amazing. And a documentarian of the rock and roll history, too, especially back in the late 60s here in Detroit.
John was the manager of MC5.
Exactly.
And they got exposure to so many great musicians and acts. And Lenny was right there getting the great shots and still travels around with her photography and puts on little shows and sells it and things like that. And it'd be great to have her on.
Detroit music scene is awesome. It's very vibrant, and they contribute to a lot of causes, too. You'll hear... pickup concerts or things that are sponsored by radio shows that feature old school guys, and they're just coming down with their acts to just sling some tunes and raise some money for some kids that need it or for, whatever the cause may be. But Detroit's got a great history. We're broadcasting live from the CRB radio station here in Redford, Michigan, just right down the street from Detroit.
Jazz Cabbage Cafe.
That's right. And you could call in any time at 313-879-5059. But the best time to call in, of course, is on Tuesday between 4 and 6.
Like right now.
Now. We were talking about a hot topic earlier, which was we call it the Kaepernick topic, which basically is about whether or not you think it's right for these NFL players to be standing or kneeling during the national anthem. That's something that's an ongoing conversation throughout the show. But right now, I know that Jamie and Rick and I had some 420 events, 420 friendly events that are in the state of Michigan this week that we wanted to let you know about. I found one that was pretty interesting on September 29th at 420. This is actually not in Michigan, but it's in Ohio, and it's their 17th annual Harvest Festival, which is in Coon Hunters Association in Medina. Sounds like a pretty cool event.
Acoustic Hookah will be playing there, and they're awesome.
I saw those guys, in fact, really up close in Jamaica a few years ago and hung out with them a little bit, and that was quite an awesome experience. Those guys are great if you get a chance to see them.
I saw myself at Hookah in the Hills.
That was one of their own events. They do that.
Yep, also in Ohio.
September 28th, actually in Michigan, at the Red Rock, which is a barbecue restaurant in Ypsilanti, Michigan. There is a CRMLA, the Coalition to Regulate Marijuana Like Alcohol, fundraiser, and we are in the final weeks of signature gathering.
Nice.
And a few more bucks and volunteers are needed to take it the rest of the way. Although things look really good, a few more bucks will get us there for sure. It would be helpful to make it out to that fundraiser and pitch in a little bit.
So you think even if one or two volunteers showed up, I think that would make a big impact. I think, even if a lot of times people, when they're thinking about volunteering, they might not feel like they may make an impact because they think they need to be joined by hundreds of other people, and of course that helps. But even just
show
one
up,
or two
just
people,
sign it.
Just show up.
Take one page and get the 8 people that can be on the page to sign it. That all is contributory. Drop $25. Everything helps out, and with everybody pitching in a little bit, we'll get it done. The pace we are on and the success we've had so far is very promising. It costs a little bit more to get to the finish line, but everything looks really good right now. As long as a few people come through, we'll be in good shape.
And that's Thursday the 28th.
Thursday the 28th, Red Rock in Ypsilanti. I believe it starts at 6 o'clock.
Saturday, October 7th, Motor City Normal has their meeting down at Cannabis Council at 11 o'clock in the morning. That's a very dynamic group. I'm on the board of directors of Michigan Normal, and Motor City Normal's been going for a long time. At 6 o'clock on Friday, October 13th, Dana Nessel for Michigan AG is having a campaign fundraiser at the law office of Michael A. Camoran. In addition to that, at 1 o'clock on Saturday, October 14th, there's a call to action for medical marijuana patients and caregivers at the Rosa Parks Circle in Detroit. In addition to that, kick out the jams with MI Legalize in Detroit, Friday, October 20th at 6 p.m., and Canna Catwalk in Colorado, if you happen to go out there, Saturday, October 21st at noon. That should be exciting. Then don't forget October 15th, MICBD Conference in Kensington Hotel in Ann Arbor, www.micbd.com. On October 17th will be the next meeting of the License Control Board for the Michigan Marijuana Facilities Licensing Act, which will be in Lansing.
And also on Thursday night, City Council meeting in Owasso to discuss whether or not to opt into the MMFLA, the Michigan Marijuana Facilities Licensing Act.
Mm-hmm.
So whether or not they want to participate in allowing marijuana business activity in their city, and I believe I will be there discussing that with them. And then we'll talk about it again, but a really cool MI Legalized fundraiser in November 4th at Sidetrack in Ypsilanti. The Democratic gubernatorial candidates will be there, including Gretchen Whitmer.
Oh, you know who's going to be the MC moderator of that event?
Yes, I do.
Who is that?
I've been holding out on that.
Okay.
Because I think if we mention it now, it would be a deterrent.
Who is it?
Rick Thompson
Yes,
himself.
Oh, my
that's
Lord!
me. Oh, shamelessly drawing attention to my own accomplishment. Yes, okay.
Congratulations there, Rick. That's huge. You got to represent.
No, that's going to be a good one, man. If we got Gretchen and Dana to win, we'd be in better shape.
Well, in important news, did we want to have any other dates before I take us on a sidetrack? Because I was going to completely blow our whole
No, I just wanted to reiterate again. I just wanted to ask Jamie, when's the Red Rock one?
That is Thursday, September 28th.
Because
that's coming up.
The Tres Cerdos there is by far the best barbecue I've ever had in my life. So
the place has good reputation. And when I stayed in Ypsilanti most of the week, when I was working a lot at Third Coast, I oftentimes dined at the Red Rock myself.
Nice.
It is a good place.
Oh, it's delicious.
You know, so we talked just briefly about Dana Nessel for Attorney General. Her the current Attorney General in the state of Michigan is Bill Schuette, and can we get a wah 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 sound that I can punch a little button anytime we say his name?
Shitty.
Yep. So he's announced that his run for governor. We've expected this for a while. It hasn't been a secret. It's just been something he's been delaying on announcing. The question remains, of course, who the Democrats will get to put up against him that might be able to put up a good fight. Gretchen Whitmer certainly has the bona fides. She's done 2 terms in the Senate. She was term limited out. She did a fantastic job. Even though her party was in the minority, she made her presence felt and certainly made a difference in the way legislation was handled during her tenure.
She was the minority leader, and on our issue, when it got in front of her, she was very reasonable and supportive.
Now, having said all that, the question becomes, is she a strong enough candidate to defeat someone like Schuette, who has a long history in politics, who's been in the legislature, who's been on the appeals court, who's been the attorney general, and who is, the anointed son of the pharmaceutical industry in Michigan?
I read this Jack Lessenberry piece not too long ago, actually, in the Toledo Blade, which is one of the places he syndicated, and he discussed how typically the Democrats should be in line for winning this next gubernatorial. If historically it swings back and forth, and if all things would remain according to that, normal kind of process or pattern, we would count on the Democrats winning now. But things are different now, and this is Schuette, and it's a real possibility, a real, maybe even likelihood, that he will be our next governor.
Here's what I think of that.
That's a good comment. I will say this, though. The historical data doesn't apply any longer because redistricting in 2011, instituted by the new governor, Rick Snyder, that changed the game. Now it's almost impossible to get a change in party in any of these districts because of the way that the lines are drawn.
I don't think, but for the governor's race, it's just a statewide vote, and those districts, that pertain to like the Senate districts or what have you that have been gerrymandered, should be like the Attorney General, Secretary of State, and Governor should be outside of being affected by the gerrymandering.
Now you would think so too, but what we've seen though is a change in demography. That's an inappropriate term. But we've seen a change in elections, as far as I can tell. And perhaps on a statewide election, it will be just as you've described. There won't be any difference. People will still vote their conscience. But to me, it just seems like there's been a change.
I'm skeptical that we'll see a true reflection of the will of the voters. It's just been so long without really feeling as though we were lining up with kind of the collective consciousness of the people and our elected leaders, that I don't have a lot of faith in that. But it would be great to see a nice sea change in our political approach in Michigan.
Not as if we should take the presidential election as a huge indicator of what's going to happen in the gubernatorial election, but Donald Trump just won by a sliver margin here in Michigan. I think it's fair to say he's probably alienated more people than that sliver margin of victory. Now, if those people vote their party, or at least the party that they voted in the presidential election, I believe we may be able to get a Democrat to prevail.
Is it true? It seems like it. But is it true? Hold on a second.
It is true. I am larger than the average man.
It's a hanger. Cliffhanger. Okay.
He's definitely not taking a bong rip.
Make sure Evelyn knows what's going on.
Yeah, we'll cut that part out later.
Is it true that after Trump's presidency, that there are people who no longer like him as president and maybe be a little, I don't want to say ashamed, but realize that they were wrong in terms of voting for him? But would there be anybody that has gone from not supporting Trump to supporting Trump after seeing him in action for the first few months of his presidency? So if anything, he's lost some support. It would just seem, but then again, logic and reason don't seem to line up with this whole process here.
Here's one thing I'll say is that a lot of people that support the Trump philosophies are not people that vote. For whatever reason, you can fill in the blanks. They're rural. They don't believe in the process. They're distrustful of the government. So when we see the Trump opinion polls drop down to like 37%, that's significant, because that's not just an opinion poll of voters. That's an opinion poll of all Americans. So when I'm looking at what is an accurate gauge of how the United States feels about the presidency, an election isn't always accurate, because there's a significant portion of America that doesn't participate in that. It's these opinion polls. Those are more trustworthy, in my opinion. And if you just look at one in isolation, it's easy to dispute that. But when you look at a series of polls from a variety of different sources, all of which point to about the same conclusion, it's almost impossible to have any logical argument with it any longer.
Yeah, it's how the way it pans out. There could be more supporters voting for Trump than not, and sometimes, it's a marketing scheme over a political run. So, we all know, being a businessman, he's quite good at marketing, right? Quite good at. So, is it such a big surprise that he won? For somebody that's successful in a lot of his marketing schemes.
There's a lot of. I'm sorry to jump in after leaving for a second, but there's so many factors. I mean, that I've kind of internalized here, like the hatred for Hillary, and no matter who she was running against, right? They were going to get the vote, and then the fact that he's not a lifelong politician. Was appealing to a lot of people too.
Didn't take any funding.
Well, when you talk about drain the swamp, right, and then the first thing you do is nominate the Republican National Committee president as your advisor, then you've embraced the swamp.
You make ahead of all the departments the people who have tried to eliminate those departments.
Exactly correct. The guy who's in charge of Scott Pruitt, in charge of the EPA, is an absolute nightmare for conservation issues. The person that's in charge of Highway and Safety Transportation Association absolutely believes in commercial trucking and doesn't think that the cafe numbers are correct, and that we shouldn't be putting any kind of caps on driving time for truck drivers, and there shouldn't be axle limits and load restrictions. So come on.
These guys are collectively trying not to implement science in the process of making decisions, and even for things in which it is immediately required.
So Jamie, you and I have spent a lot of time talking to people in the legislature over the years, and one of the things I get from legislators is that a lot of the citizens that come to them are emotional but not educated on the subjects that they're talking about. So they go to lobbyists and listen to the people who are educated on the subjects so that they can get what they consider to be the facts. Well, that sort of ignores the fact that most of those lobbyists are there on a paycheck for a particular interest, and they color the facts that they give to legislators to preserve or protect their interest of their client.
Right, and you usually have a group of legislators, 5 maybe, I mean, pick your number, a small group, working on a particular issue. The other lawmakers kind of look to that group for guidance. Mm-hmm. And so the original information comes from people with these particular interests, and that is what this group decides based on that. And then the larger group of lawmakers go along with it because they relied on them to kind of look into the issue and make some determination.
You know, while we're speaking about lawmakers, I realize we have a horrible error that we made already today, and we forgot in our events calendar to talk about Yusuf Rabi's press release tomorrow. Michigan House Representative Yusuf Rabi.
Yep, he's got his press conference tomorrow. But in addition, we also didn't mention that we were going to be speaking with former State House Representative Jeff Irwin in a few minutes as well.
Oh, okay. So, way to point out all of our errors.
We have a lot of errors here.
Nice.
That's what I thought you were going to say. That's why I had to say it.
No, I was going to advertise the press conference for Yusuf Rabi. As many of you know, whether you've been following the Jazz Cabbage Cafe or the socialrevolution.org or any of the other news media that are covering the subject, the MMFLA's licensing board has intimated that there's going to be some negative consequences for dispensaries and other types of businesses who remain open and servicing patients during this transition period where we go from the unregulated business community that exists in Michigan today to the highly regulated business community for medical marijuana that will exist in 2018 and beyond. So Yusuf Rabi is introducing a bill to protect those businesses to make sure that they're not completely shuttered and that patients have at least an expectation of a continuity of access to some of those specialized medicines that can only be obtained in many cases through these distribution centers. And that press conference will take place tomorrow. Jamie, I believe that's at noon.
Yep. And there's a bill being introduced in the Senate that its counterpart,
a companion bill,
by Senator Netzel or something similar to that, from Dearborn, I know, area, and also a Democrat. But we have heard that there is some Republican support, some a few of the Republicans who are also at least on the bill, if not introducing it, I believe. So we'll see what kind of support it has when it hits the floor. But it's really popular, and hopefully it catches on and it just makes sense. I mean, these places, and we've said this, and we had Paula Givens talking about this with us last week. It just makes sense to allow the existing places who want to stay in operation and who are fine with the local community to submit an application and stay open based on the process of getting rejected, or approved.
Right.
And it's only a few more months, regardless.
You know, we talk about the bipartisan nature of Rabi's support for his bill. He originally announced, or the word leaked out at least a week ago, maybe longer, that the bill was coming. And he waited a little bit to do the press conference so that he could gain some additional support amongst those other people across the aisle. Rabi being a Democrat from Ann Arbor, he actually occupies the district formerly represented by Jeff Irwin, who'll be on our show a little bit later. It's important to note, too, that this makes sense from a bipartisan standpoint because when you look at the response that the community has given to the License Control Board and their meetings, this is not just a Democratic issue. It's not just a youth issue, and it's not just a cannabis issue any longer. Constituents of all across the board are looking for it. In fact, the last License Control Board meeting, which I attended, was at a country club because I needed a room so large. There were 577 people in attendance at that meeting, and that's a number that was flashed on the screen during the broadcast. I've got that information from Cindy Hicks, who happened to join me talking to Thetford Township last night, talking about the same conversation that Jamie's talking about having with Owasso on
Cindy's
Thursday.
a former trustee of Thetford Township, I
Yep,
believe.
she certainly is. She's very knowledgeable.
She understands the processes there very well.
She's leading a little committee to help draft a proper ordinance in Thetford Township. Thetford is special in Genesee County because they've got something called the Green Triangle there, where they have like 8 or 9 different dispensaries right congregated in one particular area of real estate. And that's the area that they're looking at to zone for marijuana businesses. They've had some real estate speculation where people have purchased property in anticipation of an ordinance that would be favorable. So there's a lot of progress on this, and you're seeing people of all walks of life. Jamie and I have spoken in Pinconning and at many other places too. You see a lot of elderly people in support of the business community and the new licensing program, just as much as you do younger people looking for an opportunity to put their work into an area that they love. So for a bipartisan effort in the legislature to preserve that, it's not out of the realm. And if you look at the MMFLA program itself, which was, like it or not, primarily driven by Republicans and approved with an overwhelming majority in the House and Senate, which were both dominated by Republicans, this is an issue that party should be embracing as well.
I agree. It would solve the problem. It would be very popular. And again, it just creates a scenario where these existing places that predominantly haven't caused any issues for years would just stay open for a few more months, and people would continue to get served, and there would be no lag in access to medicine, and it just makes sense.
So what are the steps?
Because it makes sense, it's probably not going to happen.
What are the steps a citizen could take? To
they can talk to their representatives, their senator and their House representative, and encourage them to vote yes on the bills. It'll first be taken up by committee, each one in the House and the Senate, and I don't know which committee it's been assigned to. Maybe we don't find out until the press conference. I really don't know. Have you heard which committee it's been assigned to, or would likely be assigned to?
If it's got a bill number, then it's been assigned to a committee, but I don't know if it's got a bill number yet. Typically, though, those go through the House and Senate Judiciary Committee, although we have seen a couple of other bills related to medical marijuana be shuttered through different committees, right, which is kind of frightening.
Particularly in the Senate.
Yeah. A lot of times they do that because the bill sponsor feels he has an advantage for passage in that particular committee, and that's kind of a bullshit way to do law.
They're willing to take it up. They've got some buddies on the committee, that type of thing. It's politics.
I know. We don't have to like it. Even
it's degraded. The system is not right, but it's kind of, you have to kind of recognize it for what it is more than kind of wish it was better.
We
talked about that here last week too a little bit.
Come into focus just recently. Detroit named the nation's most violent city again. Also, Michigan receiving a
Detroit
D-.
Number one.
Yep.
Right.
Michigan a D- on transparency. Also, there's a big conversation now about adjusting automobile insurance rates, and it's revealed that Michigan drivers pay 82% more than the national average for automobile insurance because
especially
of our no-fault
Detroit
system. Yes, and in the urban areas it's way worse. There's no oversight on a statewide level to control what people pay and how payments are dispersed. So someone who has personal liability and property damage, PLPD coverage, pays about 75% more than they should because they're paying into a fund for coverage for people that their insurance doesn't even affect. So we've seen a lot of tomfoolery with different industries in Michigan over the decades. It's not new, but it's, as Jamie mentioned, it's a system that we have to work with. So we can recognize it as faults, but that doesn't mean we detach from the process. You still have to remain engaged. You have to contact your legislature. You have to make sure you act locally because all politics begins locally, even if it's enacted on a statewide level. And watch out for judgeships, too. A lot of times things that were intended by the legislature and by the people are altered by the courts because we have judges that legislate from the bench. And oftentimes
sheriffs and prosecutors.
Those elections are so poorly voted. Oftentimes people don't even go to those sections of the ballot to fill it out. It is such a sad comment on where we're at right now.
Well, again, we were the sad state of things, our president, problems in Michigan. There's been a lot more activism. Mm-hmm. And hopefully that results in more people coming out to the polls to want to try to affect change.
We want to come back full circle to the whole Kaepernick issue. The fact is, regardless of what you think about Colin and everything that went on, that's inspired people to recognize that when groups of prominent individuals make a political statement, it makes national news, and that a few people standing up for what they believe in can make a difference. So I think that the inspiration itself of that situation is been worth it as an American experiment. I called it in an article I've written, the kneel heard round the world, because really it was an effort this last week that made papers all across the globe.
Yeah, and you could still call in. I'm sure a lot of our listeners have their own opinion about this, and this is something we're going to talk about the whole show, because why not? 313-879-5059. I know we are expecting a caller around 5 o'clock. And, that's normally the time that Rick does our news at 5. We're going to push that back a little today.
Yeah.
He's still going to do it, though, so don't go anywhere.
He'll pick away at it a little bit.
I'm
He's
gonna
not
do
as
it,
prepared
baby.
as he probably should be.
I'm going to do the news like the news has never been done before.
But this next read, I know, Jamie, you did our last sponsorship read, but I'm going to have you do this one as well because it is Chong's choice.
Okay, and it's not so much a read; it's just I make it up.
Yeah, well, he's not reading any. This is actually off the top of his head.
Even though I created scripts for both of them, he's not reading anything. Okay.
They both have to be approved and then made, and we're waiting for those things to happen. But we're really happy to have Chong's Choice, and they are they're existing in other regions in the country where the laws are a little bit more advanced, and as soon as possible they are prepared to bring in high quality medical products to the market here in Michigan, and many different things, bud, cartridges, oil, infused products, very high standard of quality, but they're not going to charge any more necessarily, and we're happy to have them on board. And the guys from BDT, of course, are involved with them, and BDT themselves have been a really great thing for this community. Helped out quite a bit, so thank you to Chong's Choice for being a great Jazz Cabbage Cafe sponsor.
And just a side note, this is actually Chong plucking away here in this song. Do you hear it?
Playing guitar, yep.
He's playing the guitar. This is Little Daddy's Junior's Jerk, which
Chong is
features Chong.
very talented man.
Sweet. Well, we actually, I believe is this Jeff's number on the phone right here? Jeff, you with us? Do we have a caller? We do have a caller. They're not here anymore. But for now, we're going to listen to the smooth sounds of Little Daddies. So go ahead.
All right. Hey, we're coming up here in a second. I'm kind of excited for this because it is really cool. A recording from about a year ago with Tommy Chong, in which I got a chance to discuss with him his experiences in Michigan and getting the key to the city in Hazel Park and bringing his brand to Michigan and working with the people here and his history in the area. And it's all very interesting, and
it's a good one.
We have it lined up here for you today.
When I started, it was just a very simple little joint that would help me, with my music and with my attitude and with my, because back in the day, we never had anything. We never had money. Especially musicians. We were out sleeping in some girlfriend's garage sometimes, or on the couch. But we always had the magical plant somewhere around. There was always a joint to be had somewhere, and as long as you had something to smoke up, life was good. And especially Detroit area, back in the 70s, or late or 60s, late 60s, when they had the riots.
Yeah, 67.
It was the weed that kept everybody normal and calm and collected, and we just turned all that anger, fuss into creative thinking, and it was, and it still is. It still is. It's the tranquilizer of the world.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Yep, and of course, last year the city of Hazel Park gave you the key to the city, and you returned the favor with a joint to the mayor, and I think she was really excited about that.
that was a very well. We have to go through that. We have to go through the political dance, and that's what it is. It's a dance, because the truth is we've had a system in place for many, many years now where we grow and process and sell to people that need the medicine, and that underground market is thriving even more so now than ever before, because now the fear of incarceration and the fear of being, having mail opened because of the smell, that those days are gone now. And so what we have to do is comply and take advantage of the fact that it's legal and help craft the laws to make them sensible, because right now the government and the police are dancing around with trying to equate marijuana with alcohol, and that's just simply not the case. If anything, you want to equate marijuana with aspirin, because it works in the same way, and it should be regulated the same way. We should have child-proof containers, which they do have. And that's what I've been doing with my marijuana now. What I do, I've been on a chemo treatment for the cancer that I had. And what I use my anti-chemo pill bottles with the child-proof lid to store my pot, because it's a perfect container. And that's all we need, to protect anybody, is that you got to have those childproof tops on your containers, and the problem solved. So, we just got to treat marijuana like we would treat any medicine given to us by our Creator, and just enjoy life.
Well, you gave us a PSA last year for the Am I Legalized campaign, and it ran up north for several months, and it got a lot of great response, and it was very helpful. And we really appreciate your support and interest in trying to pave the way for more business, or just more people not getting into any kind of stupid legal entanglement over just wanting to participate in growing some cannabis. And we're going to try to make that happen this year, so you can come on in and do what you need to do here, and get the quality and the standards and the proper philosophy behind a lot of this stuff. But yeah, actually, I'm all for it, man. Like I said, in Hazel Park, it wasn't just a symbolic gesture. It was a definite. I really love Michigan and the whole area. I'm Canadian, so you might as well say Michigan is like Canada. Sure. Yeah.
So
it's actually part of Canada that's south of Michigan.
Yeah. So we have that mindset, if nothing else, in common, and I want to continue to the point where I would like to get some roots, some real estate in that area. I'm looking to create all sorts of. I've got all sorts of plans, to revitalize that whole area of Michigan, and pot's going to save the world.
Yeah. Pot's going to save the world. I love that interview, Jamie. Good job, man.
It was a very good job.
He did a great job, too, at Hash Bash when we had him there. I got to tell you, Tommy has a lot of energy for a man of his age.
Nobody has done as much in every single different area of this collective kind of movement as Tommy Chong has.
I'm not afraid to say Michigan is the California of the Midwest. If you look at our radio broadcast here, we've talked about Snoop Dogg coming to the state. We talk about Tommy coming to the state. We have interviews you and I have both done with these guys. Come on.
Hey, I want to toss in there that I just spoke with John Sinclair during the break. Mm-hmm. He is going to call in next week. We were going to play a song from Wednesday night in which he participated with me in an Am I Legalized meetup in Ann Arbor at the Home of Medicine. And they always improv, and these musicians were just world-class, and it was a great performance, and we have a snippet of it here to play for people, and we'll have him on next week.
Absolutely. It's going to be
Sinclair,
exciting.
talk about legalization and some of his amazing history next week.
So for now, we were going to have a caller. I think we dropped him. We're trying to get him back. Until we do, Rick, you want to read the news at 5, since it is, 5 p.m., and you read the news so well. So far, the show's been going pretty good. I think that we have something good on our hands here, guys. We got a couple big subjects. We've had so many callers calling in.
Definitely have something big in my hands.
Again, the number here is 313-879-5059.
It's radio, so there's no verification on that, Jimmy.
That's why I felt very confident in saying that.
All right, this is the Cannabis News. My name is Rick Thompson. It is September 26th, 2017. Welcome to the Jazz Cabbage Cafe radio program. And let's start off with President Donald Trump. In his temporary budget dealing with Democrats, President Trump has agreed to continue the ban on using federal funds to interfere in states' legal cannabis practices. But as 2018 nears, a government stance is largely still up in the air. Now, you know this as the Rohrabacher-Farr Amendment, which is now being renamed the Rohrabacher-Blumenauer Clause, and it'll effectively serve to protect state medical marijuana programs from intrusion by federal authorities only until December 8th, 2017. How come? Because they approved it as part of a temporary budget extension, which provides some emergency relief for some of the funny natural disasters we've had. Now, the legislation has increasingly found bipartisan support in the past few years. In recent months, though, its iterations have also encountered some last-minute sticking points, like Attorney General Jeff Sessions. Late spring, he sent a letter to leaders in Congress asking them to forego the federal protections for cannabis, which states and their operators are already afforded. In July, the Senate Appropriations Committee approved their version of the new amendment and said, screw you, Jeff Sessions. And in August, a U.S. District Court upheld interpretation of the Rohrabacher-Farr that protect states' legally compliant good actors for the second time. But earlier this month, a committee from the Republican-held House instead chose to reject its version of the amendment for inclusion in the federal budget. Then, less than 1 week later, the president agreed to the clause's inclusion in that short-term federal budget he collaborated on with Dems, and that was a move that reportedly gave some Republicans pause. Let's talk about another place in Michigan that is sort of in a bad shape. Gaylord. Headlines from just earlier today, Petoskey News, Gaylord trooper sees large amount of marijuana. Now, let's see if that's actually true. On Monday, Michigan State troopers at the Gaylord Post received a tip about an outdoor marijuana growing operation on public property hidden off a walking trail in Bear Creek Township. Guys, that's stupid as hell. Don't do that. The witness who called it in had seen a man walking around tending to some plants with fertilizer. After further investigation, they noticed marijuana growing in pots and called the state police. Cops interviewed him. They served some search warrants, determined he was a suspect, and then they seized 30 marijuana plants. Now, in the state of Michigan, I really don't think we call 30 marijuana plants a lot of marijuana. Let's talk about the Michigan Medical Marijuana Facilities Licensing Act. Now, the MMFLA Licensing Committee has been meeting, licensing board. However, we received a press release from Licensing and Regulatory Affairs last week, saying that Michigan will allow stacking of certain licenses, what's sometimes referred to as one-stop shopping, for some medical marijuana businesses. Medical marijuana business in our state is, of course, expected to explode next year when the state begins to hand out licenses, writes Kathleen Gray from the Detroit Free Press. And new rules released Thursday by the Department of Licensing and Regulatory Affairs will prove to be even more profitable for certain entrepreneurs. They've allowed licensees to apply in 3 different categories for the same area: grower, processor, and dispensary, locating all of those businesses in one facility, which mirrors our marijuana micro-business proposal in the MI Legalize language. It's something we've had a lot of inquiries about, said a spokesman for Lara. People seeking licenses will still have to go through the approval processes in their home cities and the state, including background checks. And if approved, they'll have to ensure there are separate workspace areas, entrances, and exits for each of the licensed operating functions. Folks, that's the news today, September 26th, 2017. I'm Rick Thompson. Thanks for listening to Jazz Cabbage Cafe.
If I'm not mistaken, we should be ready with former Michigan State House Representative and current political advisor for the CRMLA, the Coalition to Regulate Marijuana Like Alcohol, Jeff Irwin. Are you there?
The strong silent type, Jeff Irwin. We love you, Jeff, if you can hear us.
Jeff, you there?
I'm going to blame this on Jamie.
All right, it's okay.
That's right.
It's okay.
If Jeff Irwin was online, he'd say, Rick Thompson, that was some damn good news reporting.
I was going to say it.
And all I did was read.
I was going to say, so Jeff, are you with us now?
I am with you. Can you hear me?
All right.
Great.
All right.
This has been flawless so far. All right.
We're doing great. Congratulations. Thank you very much for calling in, Jeff. We always appreciate it. As Jamie said, former House Representative, your replacement in your district is going to have a big press conference tomorrow. What do you think about that?
Yeah, well, I've been proud of Representative Yusuf Rabi for a long time. He's done some great things in local government, and he's a all-around great guy. That's one of the reasons why he cruised to election victory here in Ann Arbor, which is a pretty discerning community, at least in my opinion. Maybe I'm motivated in that regard. But, he's going to have a press conference coming up this Wednesday. I saw the announcement. I'm certainly proud of him standing up for, access for patients and trying to keep safe and legal access open, and also to make sure that the folks who've been sticking their necks out providing access for all this time while the law has been so hinky and misunderstood and butchered by the courts. Those folks don't deserve to be pushed out of the scene. As long as they're operating in a way that's compliant, they should be welcomed in.
Well, exactly, and it's only for a few months anyway. If they're accepted by their community, there really hasn't been any issues, and they can continue to be there at least until it's deemed they don't qualify for continuing on under the new state rules. It really shouldn't be that big of an issue at this point. Provisional
licensing was mentioned as a concept during the License Control Board meeting that we just recently had in Bath Township by Jim Garrick, who's a national speaker for LEAP. That's a concept that Robbie had already embraced and already had in his mind with this language. Where do you see this going? Do you think we're going to have much success with this legislation in the legislature? I mean, you were just recently out of your position. 2016, you were in the House, so you're very familiar with the players here.
Sure, I certainly know a lot of the members, and I think that the key to whether or not this sort of legislation is going to move is really dependent upon whether or not the interest of the House and Senate leadership can be moved to act. The biggest challenge that any idea faces like this is that there's such a short time frame between where we are today and the impact of the licensing board's decisions on in terms of patient access. And so, moving any sort of bill to the legislature takes a fair amount of time. I mean, not only are there procedural and constitutional rules and sort of the normal order, but anything just takes a long time. So I don't want to handicap the chances exactly because we haven't had a chance to yet see how the Republicans are going to react to it. But let's not forget that in the House, the Republicans have a 63-47 advantage, and in the Senate, the advantage is even greater. There are 11 Democrats and 27 Republicans. It's going to remain to be seen. I'm not in Lansing on a day-to-day basis, so it remains to be seen where Representative Robbie's colleagues are going to be at on this issue. I certainly haven't heard from enough of them to make any determination yet. But I do know that there are some folks on the Republican side of the aisle who are concerned about, the law we passed last fall. I mean, the legislature passed this law, and good, bad, or ugly, and in all of its ways, the main point of it was to provide safe and legal access to patients. And for anyone who voted for that law or was around during that time, the idea that the interests of the patients have to be bent to provide some sort of impact on the market is just not in accordance with what everyone was thinking about when we were debating those laws.
When you're talking about debating those laws, one of the features of the MMFLA was the creation of a 17-member Rules Advisory Committee by the governor. Now, after the bills were passed and the governor signed it, the Licensing and Regulatory Affairs determined that the bills were, for lack of a better term, flawed in their creation, and that they could not impanel that 17-member board because the industries that it would draw from simply don't exist. It seems to most of us observers that the legislature had in their mind an idea that those people on that committee would be drawn from the current business community, and that when we talked about testing labs and cultivation centers, that there were certainly enough experts in the state to fill those roles. Do you think it's fair for Licensing and Regulatory Affairs to characterize that failure to impanel a 17-member board as a failure by the legislature?
Well, I think it's fair to say that your depiction of the history is more on point, right? When I do think it's fair to say that when we were in there debating those bills, that those positions that were slotted to be individuals in the industry were absolutely intended for, for individuals, like for instance, we had testing labs operating, we had dispensaries operating, we did have, caregivers operating who were contemplated in the license chain for cultivators. And so it seemed pretty straightforward that there are people already in this business, and that the legislature intended that the folks who knew about the business, knew about patient care, knew about the consumer interface, knew about the cultivation process, should all be involved in advising the department. So I'm not sure if I want to characterize the department as being unfair, because I've never heard their rationale and haven't given their side to listen to. But absent that, in a vacuum, it seems pretty obvious that the department would want to get advice from people who know what they're talking about. And if you're trying to find people who know what they're talking about in terms of cultivating cannabis, you want to talk to growers. That's pretty obvious. And for them to not want to employ or the advice of people who are operating dispensaries, for instance, because of the questionable status of dispensaries as a result of the McQueen decision, that just seems like unnecessarily putting one's head in the sand and denying the department the kind of information that could make their decisions better. I mean, ultimately, the director and the department gets to make a lot of decisions. They have a lot of power to determine how these regulations are determined and how they evolve over time. And it's important that they listen to the people who know best. I doubt they would disagree with that, actually, and I bet that they are looking at their current situation as more of a temporary fix. But you and I know that getting these rules right at the beginning is especially important. Sure, they can change, but that's difficult. It'd be better to get them right in the first place.
The fact that the 17-member panel isn't impaneled has less of an impact as long as the department kind of takes this seriously and does listen to people who know what they're talking about. And it seems as though they are. Like, they're pretty reasonable people and taking an approach that makes a lot more sense.
Well, the work groups will do that. That'll incorporate people from the average walk of life with those rule-makers.
So
I think their decisions would benefit from having that panel. But I would agree with you, Jamie. I've heard the individuals speak at a couple different conferences and events and at the licensing meetings via recordings. Thank you to folks like Rick Thompson who've made those available through his website. And what I hear them saying publicly is very encouraging. They do seem to have a genuine curiosity about how the business operates and how they can learn as much as possible about it, to get good regulations. So I guess maybe that's part of my reticence to characterize their opinion in any sort of unfavorable light, because so far it does seem as though the department has been trying to do the right thing, but it's almost as though they're not getting a lot of support, for instance, from the governor's office. I mean, not only do we not have the advisory panel, which you're talking about, the licensing board was very, very late, and I think that that's creating part of the time crunch and part of the pressure that patients and providers are feeling right now.
We've got a big move to legalize marijuana in Michigan, the Committee to Regulate Marijuana Like Alcohol, and you are the political director. We received a couple of press releases, a note from Robin Snyder and then a national note from Rob Campia, the leader of Marijuana Policy Project, and that was an appeal for funds. Can you explain to folks what we're talking about as far as the messaging right now?
Well, absolutely. I mean, we are going to be constantly appealing for funds between now and just before the election next year. Right now, it's especially critical that people who have an opportunity to give do so, because we're in the phase of the campaign right now where we're trying to gather these signatures, and the budget for a campaign like this kind of looks like a barbell, right? You've got an expensive part at the beginning where we're paying to put people on the street to gather signatures. And then we've also got a very expensive media campaign that we're really looking at next summer and fall. And so both of those efforts are going to require an amazing amount of money, and we're going to be asking everyone to contribute in ways that they can, whether that's by putting up $5 or $50 or $500 or $50,000, we're going to be asking people at all those levels and probably more, if we can find folks who have that kind of capacity. But we're also going to be asking folks who don't have money to give to send out good vibes and vote yes and tell their friends and
get a few signatures.
Organize their networks. Yeah, or right now get some volunteer signatures.
Yeah.
But the situation we're in is pretty straightforward, I would say. We've had a great amount of success. We've gotten a lot of great support from a number of donors. You can look at our previous campaign's finance reports. I'm not going to go into it in terrible detail because I already talked too much. But what I can say is we've already done very well. We've raised a lot of money. We've got a broad coalition that includes a lot of the best activists in Michigan. And not only have our paid efforts really gathered a ton of signatures, we've also gotten good turnout from the volunteers led by the folks at Michigan Legalize. So things are coming together. And we're coming down to this choke point at the end of the petition gathering period, and we're trying to, ring the alarm for everybody to help us get over the line here at the end. And our budget's going to be, tight, obviously, coming down the both ends of this barbell. So we're here at the bottom end of the first barbell, and I don't know, I feel good about our trajectory. I really do. But we definitely need some folks to step up.
So we talked about it a little bit before, but one way, and very soon, that people could help out would be by attending the event that's scheduled for Thursday night in Ypsilanti.
Well, that's certainly true.
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead.
No, I was just emphasizing Jamie's point. Jeff, there's one thing that I just had to bring up. Robin Snyder in her email said, don't be surprised if the campaign shuts down just a couple days after you receive this newsletter. The image you're giving us is one of a much more optimistic perspective. Is that the right thing for us to believe right now, that we're doing pretty well with the campaign? I mean, it's kind of a conflicting message between the newsletter Robin sent out, which was very dire and desperate, and what we're hearing right now. I just want to make sure our listeners have the proper pepped-up attitude and they believe in what we're talking about here.
Well, the fundraising pitch is real. It's absolutely true that every week we are laying out serious coin to bring in the signatures at the rate necessary to get enough before the deadline. And every week, Robin and myself and others, but mostly Robin, are working really hard to make calls and develop leads and ask everybody who can give to give. Now, mostly, those conversations are happening with folks that have greater capacity, and you haven't seen as many calls that are as broad as that one in this campaign from Robin as you might expect, because she's been focusing on donors with higher capacity. And so I don't know if I'm giving you the answer that fully sorts this out for you, Rick, but the situation is both one where we can express optimism about the progress we've made over the time frame we've made it, express confidence that we can still get there before the end of November, because we've got 80% of the signatures and we still have 2 months left to go. That's a pretty good position to be in right now in the campaign. But is it real that we need donations every week in order to sustain that trajectory? That's also real.
Well said.
So, I don't know
a few people have been stepping up, but there needs to be a lot more to keep it going and to take it into the next phase, as you were saying.
We still have a sense of responsibility to the campaign, those of us that have been involved, but we also have a reason to expect that we are going to be successful and that the goal that we've set for ourselves and that the state set for us is going to be realized. So that's what we're looking for. That optimism. Exactly.
And I feel good about it. And really, Robin's been doing a tremendous job. I don't know how much about the day-to-day that she's been facing, but I worked with Robin a little bit on those bills when they were going through the legislature, when I was in the legislature and she was outside the legislature as an advocate. And, I had a lot of respect for her then. But obviously, seeing the way that she's really been a hero on this campaign has really only increased my respect for her. And she's someone who deserves a tremendous amount of credit for, reaching out to everybody who, cares about this cause to say, look, we need to get this done. How can you help? So, a lot of us have been making a lot of those kinds of outreach. I know that both of you gentlemen have been on the front lines of this fight for years and years and years. Thank you for all of your work. And, together, I think we can do this. Hopefully some folks can come out Thursday night to Red Rock and Ypsilanti from 6 to 9 and support the effort. We're trying to raise some dollars for that event, and we're getting close to where we need to be to turn these signatures in.
Yeah, I'm not going to make it to
That's
Red
awesome.
Rock, but I'm going to donate a little bit to CRMLA because I was going to go, but now I'm going to be going to Owasso to sit in on the city council meeting to discuss the whether or not they're going to opt in.
Tell our listeners how they can do that. How can they donate? How can they contact CRMLA to make a contribution in one way or another to the success of the program?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Folks can go to our website and donate directly at www.regulatemi.org/donate. It's pretty easy to find from our regulatemi.org website. Also, if you want to jump in on the fundraiser this Thursday, it's from 6 to 9 at Red Rock in Ypsilanti. If you show up at the door, I'm pretty sure we're going to find a spot for you. Tickets are $150, and we're filling up, but we still have, I think, at least 30 or 40 seats to go. As long as we don't sell those all out, there'll be room for you. If you want to pre-reserve a seat, you can reach out to either myself or to Robin. That would be jirwin@regulatemi.org or Robin@regulatemi.org.
And people will get the most up-to-date information on the campaign, have a really good dinner. It's a great barbecue place, and hang out with some really good people who have done a lot of great work for legalization, and it's well worth it.
I can't think of a time in Michigan's history of the cannabis community when networking was less important than right now. With the way things are going and the way things are changing, having good allies and being connected properly is going to make a very big difference in your success potential. So the MI Legalized CRMLA events like this, we talked about several different fundraisers for CRMLA in our events calendar that we did a little earlier in the broadcast. Those are just excellent opportunities to participate.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Couldn't agree more. Networking is everything.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity to plug. And so if you want to reach out to Jerwin at Regulate or Robin at regulatemi.org or sign up through our website, we'd love to have you there, or show up at Red Rock from 6 to 9. This effort has been, many hands make light work, I guess is the best way to say it. And we've benefited from and are very grateful for the support we've gotten from so many folks, including both of you gentlemen. And, speaking to your point, Rick, some of the work that you've done through your website is, important for that networking and for getting the word out. And I appreciate that you are always willing to, push questions out there that need to be answered for the community.
Well, thank you for saying so. I appreciate that. One of the takeaways from our conversation today, you said 80% of signatures collected and still 2 months left to go. Is that right, Jeff?
Yeah, that's where we're at. Obviously, validity rate plays into that. I think everybody was hearing an announcement, it was almost 2 weeks ago now, that we were at 250,000. And I think when folks heard that, they thought, well, shoot, that's it. That's the shooting match. You only need 253,000, and they've got 250,000. They're there. And, I just want to stress to everybody a couple points. One is that that's just the gross number, and the valid number is usually about, 3/4 of the gross number if you're lucky, if you're doing your work right. And, I'm happy to say that the, signature gathering folks have been coming in at a good validity rate, and the volunteers have been coming in at a great validity rate. So we're in a good position because of that. But our initial plan was to turn in 360,000 signatures, or 366,000 signatures actually, to make sure that we had not just enough valids, but a little bit of cushion on top of that in case we were making some sort of error or some sort of challenge becomes successful that we weren't expecting.
Right. And one of the strategies in terms of turning in the signatures is to try to get it done by the end of October. And one of the reasons to get a little push of funding to try to make that happen, and that positions ourselves in a better timing for when the legislature has it in their control to determine whether or not to adopt or whatever, or to put their own or whatever the concerns or whatever they could possibly do throughout the process. Isn't the timing of the signature turn-in part of the strategy here?
Well, it's a part of the strategy. It's also really about resource management. We want to make sure that with respect to all of our donors that we're asking to invest in this, that we're spending those resources wisely and keeping the petitioning effort in the field, keeping that one large end of the dumbbell out there for another month is an expensive proposition. There are offices to support. There are other elements of infrastructure and overhead that we can save for the effort and roll those funds hopefully into the expensive media campaign next year and trying to get up on TV and compete with the dollars that the prohibitionists are going to spend trying to say that prohibition's a viable policy going forward for Michigan. So that's really the main motivation, is that if we can wrap this up a little bit earlier, we save some dollars for the campaign over the long term. All those turn-in locations and
probably the signature
offices and
signature gatherers probably would command more toward the end. I would imagine that's been the common.
And also we're verifying these, right? We're verifying these signatures when they come in, and that's a databasing operation right there. So that's where a lot of that overhead comes in. So if we can get it done quicker in a shorter span of time, the cost per signature ends up being lower over the course of the effort, right? So if you gather the same number of signatures over 6 months rather than 5 months, that's going to be more expensive over 6 months just because of those elements that I'm talking about. There's also the issue of timing it, as you mentioned. That's a little bit difficult just because you never know what the Board of State Canvassers are going to do. Usually there's a rhythm to how they turn these types of things around, but we've got a new state elections director, and certainly they have some wiggle room in terms of exactly when they do their work and how quickly they do their work. And quite frankly, that depends a lot also on, what kind of challenge arises. If the folks who want to stop us from winning next fall invest some time and money in, going through and fly-specking and presenting challenges to our petition, that's going to make the department take a little bit longer processing it. Whether their challenges hold any water at all, they could be just complete nonsense. It will still require the department to consider them and to respond to them appropriately.
So one thing I'd like to mention, we've had discussions about the Weed Maps billboards, and in fact a bill to restrict billboard advertising by Senator Jones is being considered right now. In fact, I think tomorrow it'll be heard in the Senate Judiciary Committee. The Weed Maps has adopted these pro-legalization billboards as an educational program, but it's been supportive of the CRMLA and the Marijuana Policy Project presence in the state. What's your opine on that situation there, Jeff?
Obviously, I love seeing the billboards. When you're driving down the road and you see a billboard that has some sort of fact that, those of us who've been working on this issue know about. Say, for instance, that youth use hasn't gone up in the states that have legalized, or that opioid deaths are 25% fewer in states with medical marijuana laws, or I think theft is another one I saw recently. Theft is down 12% in states that have legalized. They've got all these little facts that are, I think, instructive and could help the public that hasn't been thinking about this issue very much take some notice and maybe put some thought into which side of this argument is right, the prohibitionists or the folks who want to end prohibition. So that's great. I love seeing that. On another level, just to opine more broadly, sometimes I look at those billboards and I think, oh gosh, how many signatures would that billboard buy?
Right.
And how much closer could we have gotten to the goal that I think Weed Maps is ultimately going to benefit greatly from, and would like to see happen for ideological reasons as well. So I don't know. I love it. I think it's great. I want to get the Weed Maps people involved in the campaign every time I see them. And then finally, on this piece about a law to restrict the advertising, this is the part that I think is most damaging to Senator Jones's proposal. When they were putting up billboards to advertise where people could connect with providers, I didn't see a bill from the senator. But then when you start seeing billboards that start talking about legalization, start pointing out these inconvenient truths that the senator doesn't like to see on his way to the Capitol, all of a sudden we see a bill. Right. Now, I don't know that those two things are connected, but the timing of the senator's push on this bill almost makes it seem like what bothers him most is the free speech. What bothers him most is the fact that these billboards might infect some voters with the truth.
Right. You know, Jeff Irwin, you've been so generous with your time. We certainly appreciate the opportunity to talk with you here on Cabbage Cafe. I hope you'll agree to come back and speak with us again. It's been real fun.
Oh, I will. I like you guys.
That's great. Thank you.
Really appreciate it, man. Thank you.
You like
Yeah,
Jamie
thanks,
more
Jeff.
than me, but that's okay.
Yeah,
That's all right.
that's understandable.
Correct. I like you both.
Well, we like to
and that's
tease.
why I was trying to give you opportunities to plug your website, and
Don't worry, he
I
takes
like
care
your
of
guys'
himself quite
name. It's a good little name. Have a good night.
All right,
Thank
thanks,
you,
man.
Thanks, Jeff.
Hey,
You
thank
bet.
you.
Yeah, good night.
What a solid interview. That was fantastic. Jeff Irwin, current political director, Committee to Regulate Marijuana Like Alcohol in Michigan.
Hopefully he'll make an announcement about his future political aspirations at some point, because we could use him back in the mix.
Yeah, we should have him on the show.
Whether it's in state politics or even in local politics in Ann Arbor, the man's very intelligent.
Wherever he wants to put his talent would be great.
And it's more than just the cannabis issue, too. When you look at Jeff Irwin's history, he's talked and made a big impact on a lot of different issues, including Line 5 under the Mackinac Straits and some of the other controversial things that it was very unpopular to be a Democrat and support, and he still did it anyway.
There you go. I just wanted to mention before we take a break, we are going to take a music break again here. One of those things that we love.
Let's elongate it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. This one's going to have some nice ones. But before we do that, I wanted to mention a company that, of course, is special to me, Dig It Super Soil. These guys really got it going on out of Saline, Michigan.
Special dirt.
It is special. It's super special, actually. A lot of people have a lot of good results.
Yep, that's true.
I like getting dirty.
Super soil and the tea you brew yourself, and all organic, and it's just beautiful.
The growers love that tea, but it smells so bad, but it's so good.
Put a bunch of molasses in it. Well, it's literally different types of feces that you brew together to create some nutrients.
The bacteria change the constitution of the food that you give them into something that's more beneficial and easy to be absorbed by the plant material. So that's why you brew a tea to make it more accessible to plant structure.
Well, I can't talk about if that's what they do. I have no idea.
Yeah, but it's awesome.
I need a little Derek in my next batch.
Oh, that's gross.
There you go.
Don't
donate feces. That's what you need.
That's what,
all day. All day.
We'll get you on a diet for a couple of weeks, and then I'll take you up.
That's a new low for the radio show. Online, Derek's going to donate feces live in 5 minutes.
So that
special attraction.
Oh my god. We need some sound effects. Plop, plop.
We need a long break.
So
plop, plop.
After all that, great to tie in to Dig It. I guess if you needed to contact them, 734-718-8506.
They are good guys. We're just messing around.
Just add water.
So our music break. Enjoy. We'll be back in 10. I suggest rolling one up.
My connection with Motown, Berry Gordy heard our. Well, actually, it was Diana Ross that heard our band, and so she called Berry Gordy, and Berry Gordy flew to Vancouver, signed us up, and we went to Detroit, recorded a record called Does Your Mama Know About Me? And it was still being played. It's still a nice little tune, and then I got fired. I had to get a green card to work in Detroit, and Berry Gordy's the people that were handling us, they didn't know what a green card was, and they thought I was just goofing off, and so they fired me. And so I just took advantage of the fact. Well, Berry Gordy himself called me up and he said, "You're not fired." But I told Berry that I want to be a Berry Gordy. I don't want to work for a Berry Gordy. And so he funded my trip to California and to Vancouver, where I met Cheech, and the rest is history.
All right. And of course, before that, it had kind of the band had kind of a sensational name to get people's attention, and it seemed.
Oh, yeah, as a joke, yeah, we called ourselves Four Niggers and a Chink. And just to highlight the fact that we were different. It got a lot of other things, but yeah, the most telling thing about, or one of the most unknown, or maybe known, little bits of information about the Vancouvers is that we discovered the Jackson 5. In fact, Bobby Taylor, the reason we broke up is Bobby went and produced Michael's and Jackson 5's first album, and so he took us away from the Vancouvers. But yeah, that's a little side note. We met him in Chicago and took him to Detroit, and Barry Gordy saw them and signed them, and even more.
You, Mary Jane, she never complains when I hit Mary with that flame. I light up the cherry. She's so good to me. When I pack a fresh bowl, I clean the screen. Don't get me stirred up the smoke through the bubbling water's making it pure. So I got to take my hit and hold it, just like Chong. I get the bowl and I reload it. Get my 4-footer and bring it on as I take hits from the bomb.
Living in a single room with 3 other individuals. One of them was a male, and the other 2, well, the other 2 were females. God only knows what they were up to in there. And furthermore, Susan, I wouldn't be the least bit surprised to learn that all 4 of them habitually smoke marijuana cigarettes. Reefers.
just don't make it part. Nothing shaking, don't shake that street. Used to be the heart of town. Don't tell me this town ain't got no heart. You just gotta poke around. Since I'm passing your way today, you can't never change. I just stopped because I wanna say, you can't never change. I recall your darkness when it crackled like a thundercloud. Don't tell me this town ain't got no heart. Don't tell me this town ain't got no heart. Don't tell me this town ain't got no heart. When I can hear it beat out loud. Nothing shaking, don't shake that street. Used to be the heart of town. Tell me this town ain't got no heart. You just gotta poke around. Nothing shaking, don't shake that street. Used to be the heart of town. Don't tell me this town ain't got no heart. You just gotta poke around. Nothing shaking, don't shake that street. Used to be the heart of town. Don't tell me this town ain't got no heart. You just gotta poke around.
Come into Jimmy.
Oh yeah.
It's always good coming into Jimmy.
Well,
So we're back.
That's a loaded statement.
Jazz
the other way
Cabbage
around.
Cafe back
I can't hear anything.
in. You got to put your headphones on all the way.
There you go.
There you go. That's why.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're good. Jamie can hear us.
It's like having a blindfold
Rick
on and
is
saying it's dark
here.
in here.
Alan's killing it.
Mm-hmm.
We even got a new blood in the studio. What's your name again? I'm sorry.
Nick.
Nick. All right, so Nick. So anyway, I had an interesting question for Rick over the break there, which the song "Smoke Two Joints" was on. It was playing if you were listening, and it's a it's an interesting coincidence for
Classic.
Our discussion.
Art imitates life.
Anyway, I told him, once I leave this broadcast, I've been asked many times. So what's the deal? Are the dispensaries actually going to close on December 15th? What's actually happening? I don't like to read or listen to things, so you got to tell me really fast.
So really fast, the short answer is that some dispensaries will close and some will stay open. There's no ordered statewide shutdown of all distribution, testing, cultivation facilities in the state. But what the Licensing and Regulatory Affairs said was that they would look disfavorably upon any business that wanted to get licensed under the new MMFLA program if they remained open after December 15th. So somebody who looks like they're potentially going to be a legitimate contender and client and potential applicant may shut their doors. We've already seen at least one or two of the 8 licensees in the Detroit city market shut their doors in anticipation of trying to get licensed by the state. However, there's a lot of people out there that know they're not going to get licensed by the state, maybe because of they believe there's a bias by Don Bailey or other members against them because they've already operated a distribution center in the gray market, or perhaps they have some kind of a background issue that would prevent them from being qualified. In any respect, those people can probably expect to remain open. Now, whether or not they'll face increased pressure from law enforcement or from local communities, I don't know. What we're hoping, though, is that for compassionate reasons, that will allow the existing system to exist as much as it is right now in order to ensure patients have safe access to medication continuously throughout the process of moving from the unregulated to the new regulated market. So the easy answer is that in some places there are going to be some shutdowns, and it'll be voluntary for most part because those people are trying to get into the legitimate biz, but in some instances people won't. So they'll stay open. And the other thing is Licensing and Regulatory Affairs said that it would be a potential impediment, not that it would be a no vote, not that it would absolutely shut down your possibility.
And Bailey is one person of 5 on a board, and it appears, at least lately, that he doesn't have the same kind of support to carry his personal agenda, with the whole board. So hopefully that is the case. And he was calling for like a mandatory rejection of those who stay open past even an earlier date. And that chilling effect really put a lot of this in motion, so the department had to define things a little bit better, and they started off by doing something more reasonable. But there's still some hope that either this bill will pass or there'll be a better policy put in place that'll be a little bit more clear and make it easier for those places who plan on continuing to operate and likely will to kind of do so with a smoother transition and to keep medicine available for patients along the way.
The Licensing and Regulatory Affairs found it to be impossible to get a complete list of all the centers and all the different businesses in the cannabis industry that are completely open across the state because a lot of the local communities simply don't know. So the concept of a massive shutdown or some gigantic hit list just disappeared.
It should matter that the locals are fine with these operations, especially this is a local option and an opt-in, kind of a scenario here. And Ypsilanti, for example, where Third Coast is, has passed a resolution in the last couple of weeks making it clear that they're fine with us continuing to stay open and transitioning into the new statewide program.
When you say us, you're referring to Third Coast?
I'm including Third Coast, and there are 6 other dispensaries, and they went individually to each one and discussed with them that they want them to be, or at least most of them. I guess I haven't heard from everybody, but at least most of them, I assume all of them, that they want the group that exists there to remain into the next phase of the licensing.
Derek, we're almost out of time, eh?
Yeah, we're almost there. Do you guys think that the blowback from local law enforcement would be something of concern, or especially for patients going into dispensaries?
Here's my thing: is that if the local community was negatively aligned against dispensaries, they probably would have taken action against them already. So if there's a community where they're already open, then this isn't any kind of a big signal for law enforcement to do anything different.
And patients can acquire from any place as long as they don't possess more than their 2.5 ounces. So the person transferring may be in legal question, but the patient themselves shouldn't be.
So the message would be to not be scared and continue on, keeping on.
Well, to seek the advice of your legal professional, because nobody in this game should be doing anything without talking to an attorney at this point. Everything has a consequence, and if you aren't playing the game with your eyes open, you're going to get hurt.
Thank you, Rick, for the disclaimer. That's probably truly going to save our show.
It's just good advice for everybody out there.
So we do only have a few minutes left, but Jamie always has a certain segment that's one of my favorite, where he touches on calls to action, things that you can do, and we touched on it so many times within this show already, but just to always end it on that note, I think is really important. Jamie, what are the biggest things besides Thursday night in Ypsi, the fundraiser at Red Rock, which is $100, $150 a ticket?
What that has to do is getting enough signatures by the end of October to efficiently make it to ballot and carry on the campaign to victory. And so that is very important, whether or not you can attend these events or not. You can go to the websites, which is regulatemi.org or milegalize.com, and you can donate, you can volunteer, you can figure out where you can go sign, and that's what is needed right now. Also, put some pressure on your lawmaker, your senator, your House representative to support Yusuf Rabi's bill that will be introduced tomorrow.
Go to the National Normal website, normal.org. There's an automatic letter generator feature there, which means that you can send a letter to your House rep and senator super duper easy without having to look shit up. All it does is it takes your zip code and then gets it all out.
You don't say super duper and then say shit.
Hey, I have a unique broadcast style. I don't conform to rules, man. I'm a rebel. I'm a bad boy. So the fact is, you want to be able to make it easy to do activism. That's one of the ways to do it.
And don't forget, one of the most important things you could do is find us on Facebook, on YouTube, online. We're Cave radio broadcasting. We are doing Jazz Cabbage Cafe, which is from every Tuesday at 4 to 6. Tune in here, learn as much as you can about cannabis, and Jamie Lowell and Rick Thompson will guide your way and teach you exactly what you can do or what you need to know to get this legalized in 2018.
There are some elections in 2017. Make sure you're registered to vote.
Awesome. So we're going to end the way we always do with our famous song Bowler by Lettuce. But is there anything else you boys got? You good?
I'm good for now, but
I
have a story about Lettuce. I met Lettuce before and had an interesting conversation with the band.
Yeah. Well, that's amazing. I didn't even know that. It's the theme song of the show, and I didn't know that. Well, boys, it was a pleasure.
Right now.
Until next time, Jazz Cabbage Cafe.